Hello guys, and welcome back to our Motion Builder Intermediate tutorial series. This is chapter 4, and what we're going to do in this chapter is we're going to use Motionbuilders keyframing tools to go ahead and animate out her sword swing. Alright, so let's begin. Alright, so I intended to cover this in chapter 2 of the tutorial, but I wanted to make note of it because I did mention it in chapter 1, the issue with the hands and the controls. So I did a little bit of work on my end and tried to get the bone systems to work using a little trick that I thought up on the fly. It didn't work out. So yeah, the only way that I can think of that you'll be able to actually get the clean mechanism for the hands would be to go ahead and create the bones in Cinema 4D like I mentioned in chapter 1. So if you guys request it, then I'll make a tutorial on that in detail, just getting those bones in the right place and getting those in the motion builder and getting them characterized correctly. But anyway, so where we left off, we have our story here. And we've already got our character animating pretty nicely. And we even animated the head so that it would come and we'll be looking at the sword. So what we need to do is bake this animation down to the skeleton so that we can then use Motionbuilders layer tools to add some more keyframes to this. So to do so, all we need to do is right click on our character track and go ahead and plot the whole scene to the current take. We also want to make sure that we have katana flip as the take that we're going to plot to. Plot whole scene to current take, and keep everything defaults in that window that pops up, and now she is plotted to her take. So if we turn off story, we're going to see that we have the same animation that we had in story, but now she's being animated by the actual control rig rather than the story system. So for the moment, we're done with story, so we can go back to our navigator. And what I've done here is I've went into my videos, and I've went down, all the way down, and I found the material that represents our video here. So that's IMG 2550. It'll be different for you if you're using a different reference video. But in here, it's got a few parameters like where the video is, as well as the start frame and the stop frame, the playback speed, and so forth and so on. So our issue right now is we want to animate to reference. And right now, our reference isn't exactly at a good spot compared to where our character is. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to move our video start frame so that we have our reference at a good spot that matches where our character is. So I'm going to pick this last frame as the spot that I want to kind of sort of match, and then I'm just going to click and drag right here where it says 0 in the start frame, and that's just basically going to give me some slide control here that I can move back and forth with my mouse to kind of sort of pick what frame I want to start on. So at about this point here is where these two animations kind of sort of match. So now I've got myself walking up in the video, she's walking up, she goes to grab the weapon, and that's pretty much, at this point, we pretty much need to animate everything by hand. So good. So now that they both match, we can go frame by frame and just match up what I'm doing to what she's doing. So excellent. Now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and create a new animation layer. So we'll just go ahead and click this little paper with a plus, and that's going to create a new animation layer here in our animation layers palette. By default, the layer comes in as an additive layer. So this is going to allow us to add animation on top of our base animation. If we look at our base animation layer and pick one of our controls, we'll notice that there's a keyframe on every single frame of animation. This is just the nature of motion capture. And it makes it very, very difficult for us to animate on this layer. So by creating a clean layer on top, we can animate on this layer and have very few keyframes, and everything will work nicely. Let's go ahead and turn on auto key so that any changes we make with the gizmos will automatically get plotted to our character's bones. So also make sure we're in body parts mode so that we can animate just the specific body parts that we need. We'll get clean curves that way. And let's begin. So I'm going to go ahead and extend this animation out just a little bit so we have some room to play with. And we're going to go back to our base animation layer, and we're going to do one little thing. This last keyframe here in story had her head snap back up. We're going to go ahead and delete that keyframe. We're going to do it in full body mode. This way we'll get the keyframes on all the body parts. So if we do a delete, all those keyframes will go away, and now we've got just a perfect animation where her head just stops and she's just right here frozen in time. Perfect. Alright, and then let's switch back to body parts so that we can keep getting those clean keyframes on our different body parts as we animate them. Finally, let's jump back to our layer, and we'll go ahead and rename this and call this keyframe for lack of a better name of the layer. Usually I name my layers based on specific body parts and different things like that, but in this particular case I can't really think of a good name for this layer. You can name it whatever you want. Alright, so with this layer selected, with us in body parts mode, we can go ahead and let's move to the frame where the weapon is actually grabbed. So about here, and we'll start manipulating her so that we can have her in a good frame here. We should get a nice auto blend from Motion Builder. We can obviously clean up the in-betweens, but for the most part we should be pretty good. There is one other thing I want to do. Let's switch back to the base animation layer, and let's make sure we're on the last keyframe. Then let's go back to our keyframe layer, and let's set a 0 key. What this will do is it'll basically give us a initial keyframe position. Any animation before this frame will basically be all the animation on the base layer. So none of the additive keyframes will affect the base layer from this point backwards. Going forward, any additive animation we add will now affect what we're doing. Alright, so let's go ahead and move forward on our keyframe layer and get to the point where I pick up our makeshift prop weapon here. And then we'll go ahead and animate her so that she does exactly the same. So with auto key turned on, we're basically getting a keyframe for every single body part that we move without having to worry about hitting the key button a bunch of times. Really nice. Probably want to get her closer to the prop. So I'm actually going to go ahead and move her hips. And here's a little trick. So by default, what Motion Builder will do is it will automatically pin your feet to their location so that when you move the hips, you'll get this nice movement going, which is really good IK movement here. However, in this particular case, we want to move her closer to the table as a whole. So we basically want to unpin the feet, but we still want them to be pinned later, you know, so we can get that good movement. So a good fix to this, I can just go ahead and expand out my puppeteer window a little bit. Okay, actually it's already expanded out. I thought it was cut off here. Alright, so we want to basically hit this little button here, release all pinning, and that will temporarily release all the pinning for us, which will allow us to translate her as a whole without having the feet stay stuck. Alright, so we're going to get her closer to the table, and then we'll turn back on the pinning so that our feet will be pinned to the floor, or rather at least pinned to whatever location they're at, which in this case happens to be the floor for us. And then once again, like I said, for FK control, I really like to work in rotations, on local axis rotations, because you get a good idea of, you know, where your actual control really is sitting as far as its rotations are concerned, so you can fix things. So right now the axis of rotation, they're looking kind of fine to me. They're not looking too messed up, but you know, if we were working in global mode, we wouldn't really get a good idea of where our actual rotations physically on our object are. We'll hit F6 to go back to global, and working world axis for our translation of the foot. So this is going to be IK movement here. And here we go. And just basically trying to get her into a pose that is similar to the pose that I have. So pretty much a straight standing, upright pose. Trying to get her center of balance right. She looks like she's off her center of balance a little bit at the current moment. Probably some hip straightening is going to be in order here to get her to be a little bit more straight. That took care of a lot of that problem. So click our left foot effector. Motionbuilder seems to be calling it my ankle effector. Same difference. And then yeah, we just basically want to look at this at all angles and just kind of get a really good idea of where we're at. If we go to our view, we can switch to our orthographic views and, you know, get a good idea there as well of how different things are. So I'm going to use the Alt right click. The middle mouse wheel didn't seem to be scrolling in for me. So Alt right click is going to give me a really good look here at what's going on. And, looking pretty good here. Let's go ahead and orthographic, switch to the right view. Let's see how we're looking in the right view. And switch to local, which is F5, and switch to our rotate tool, and just make sure all our rotations are looking pretty good. Alright, and then we can switch back to our producer perspective camera, and make sure everything looks good from all angles. So she's looking pretty good there. We're going to want to get her arm out of her hip there. Switch back to global, switch back to our translate. Let's go ahead and move her arm a little bit off and to the side there. And so basically the concept right now is basically go from pose to pose. Basically using a divide and conquer type method, like we did before. And we're just going to go from pose to pose and fill in the in-betweens and try to let Motionbuilder do most of the heavy lifting for us as far as getting our character to look right. Alright. So yeah, this is looking pretty great. It's looking like my chest is a little bit downward. So switching to F5 for local axis. Go ahead and push her chest just ever so slightly down. Let's go back to global and let's go back to translate. And I think we're good here. Alright, so with her hand pretty much as close as we can get it, nicely set up from that angle, let's go ahead and let's look at this sword real quick and kind of see where we're at. Okay, so it's laying on its side this way, so a little bit of artistic deviation here. We're basically going to want to thinking ahead, we're probably going to want to move her hand just a little bit this way and down some more, and a little bit this way. And we're going to want to rotate her hand up. So switch to local with F5 and rotate her hand up. So she basically grabs onto it from an arcing type motion. This way later, when we add our constraints, we can actually snap that hand back on the z-axis in this motion, and thus the sword will be pointing straight out with the blade end facing down, kind of like it would be in real life. You would pick it up from like an arced hand angle like this, and then you would flick your wrist to have it point the way that you want it to point. You might also rotate it in your hands, but that would require some interesting finger motion on our part. A lot of finger animation, just to make it a little bit easier on ourselves. We could probably do it this way. Alright, so switching back to global, switching back to translate. Let's go ahead and now start to animate our fingers. So we switch to, okay, we're on X-ray mode. And I'm not seeing any of my components. Which is interesting. We don't necessarily need them too badly, although it would be nice to be able to select them directly here. But let's go ahead and translate that finger. And we're going to run into a slight issue with the finger, like I mentioned in Cinema 4D, the fact that our last finger joint isn't there. We don't have really good control as far as getting this end finger to kind of sort of point up. Nothing we can't fix in Cinema 4D with a little bit of elbow grease and work. However, it would be nice to get perfect finger animation out of Motionbuilder directly so that we don't have to go into another package to continue the animation. Yes, you can't have everything sometimes. Let's grab the hand again, bring it down ever so slightly. And then we can grab our index finger joint and try to move it up some more. And try to get it into place. Rotate the index finger joint ever so slightly in local mode. And let's see what we can get as far as proper motion here. So that's good. So yeah, just grab the FK joint here as opposed to the effectors and worked my magic there to try to get the look that I'm trying to go for. Vice versa, I guess we could try to do a rotation on the FK effector here as well, and we seem to be getting a much better looking manipulation of our finger that way. Let's see, vice versa, use our rotations. So ultimately FK really works really nicely for the fingers, with using IK for a little bit of nudging for the most part. Let's see, our hand appears to be too far in. Also, as a production tip, I mean, for this tutorial's sake and purpose, I'm going to, finesse this just to show you what's capable. But in the case of an actual, real production, you may consider not doing as much with this, especially considering the fact that more than likely people aren't going to actually see this particular area of the animation. They're not going to be that close up on the hand. Every little bit of nuance, helps sell the realism, but at the same time, take into account, your client and what they require, what types of and this all goes back to storyboarding again. Just making sure you understand where your story's going to take you, what shots are going to be good, where the character's going to be seen, and that kind of sort of thing, because you can save a lot of animator time, especially if you're working by yourself, by only animating the specific joints that you need for a specific part of the animation. Alright, we're going to go ahead and translate this finger a little bit more in the Z-axis. And finally, we're going to work on our pinky. Curl it up and finish it off. And yeah, I should have done that curl in local mode. Global is giving me a really weird axis of rotation. So once again, in fact, I would almost say it probably should be a rule never to animate in global. On an FK joint, because it could be you get some really messy rotations animating on the global axis. Alright, So looking at this from all angles, it's looking like we've got a pretty good look here as far as her grabbing the sword. So with those keyframes set, okay, and so here's the issue. Here's another issue here. Her hand is curled up throughout the whole entire animation. We didn't want to affect the base layer for all these joints, you know. So we did set that 0 key. It's kind of interesting that we're having an issue like this. Let's go over to our hip bone. And let's see where we started. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a full body 0 key. Let's see if that fixes things. And it looks like it did. I guess I must have done a body part 0 key or something. Yep. So now, as you can see, her animation is perfectly corrected. It's looking like she's got a clean walk cycle for the most part. And then when she gets here and hits that 0 key, then our animation starts to take over, and she's able to move into a standing pose where she grabs the sword. Amazing. We're going to have to do some in-betweens to get this to work really nicely. Because right now her fist moves in a straight beeline for the sword, and it doesn't look very realistic. But for the most part, we're getting there as far as our cleanup is concerned. We're able to successfully blend that additive layer. Let's go ahead and save this. And let's move into trying to constrain this sword. Alright, so our first issue right now is that we somehow turned off the video there. So we can select just the object that we want to turn textures on for. In this case, the video playing. And we go to display. And we can make that textures. That way textures don't get turned on for every object in the scene. Because turning on the textures for Testa would be kind of a bad thing, as it slows down my viewport. They may work better for you on your machine, but yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I just rather have her in lighted mode. So you can selectively change each object's texturing, which is kind of useful. Selectively have different objects have textures. By turning on texturing for the video playing, we basically have our video back, so we have our reference back. That's good to go. Another thing that might get annoying, particularly for this video, since I'm not doing any voice synchronization type stuff, the audio scrubbing is getting pretty annoying for me. So you can go under audio here in Motionbuilder and just wipe out the audio for that video there. Go ahead and hit delete, and you'll have no more audio scrubbing. So that's great. Alright, so here on frame 62, we're going to want to go ahead and enable our constraint. The constraint we'll use for today's animation will be the multi-referential constraint. This constraint is really powerful in the sense that more so than the parent-child constraint, this one allows us to actually have the sword affect the hand, or vice versa, have the hand affect the sword. Basically allows us to have dual constraining. It's also pretty useful because it allows us to change offsets in different things without necessarily destroying certain positions that we have of objects earlier in our animation. So let's go ahead and drag that into the scene. We'll just drag into some gray space here, and that'll pretty much add it to our navigator here under constraints, and it won't attach it to any objects by default. What we'll do is we'll drag the katana right here into rigid objects 1, and that'll become a constrained object. And then we'll use the hand. In particular, instead of using the right wrist effector from the motion builder control rig, we'll use the actual hand bone under Testa 2 from our skeleton. This way, no matter if we're in control rig mode or just on regular day skeletal animation mode, the sword will stay constrained to the actual hand. Alright, and we'll drag that in as a parent object. So now we have the hand with some nice animation, and we have the now we have the hand as a parent and the katana as a child. So if we go back to our keyframe layer, nothing's changed. And if we go ahead and actually activate the constraint, so if we hit snap, which will basically maintain the offset between the hand and the katana. So right now, if we look at our katana and we go into translation mode, we can see that our katana's pivot point is actually at the hilt. And our hand and its pivot point is right here. So if we hadn't have hit snap, what would have happened with a typical constraint is the sword would have been constrained to the exact rotations, and so exact local rotations and position of the hand. It would have jumped to about this location. With snap, it activates the constraint and it keeps that offset between the object and the hand, which is exactly what we want. All right, so we're going to go ahead and minimize all this. On frame 62, we basically want our multi-referential constraint, which has added this nice little field here for a reference here. We basically want the katana to be the controlling object here. And then on frame 63, I'm just going to let Motionbuilder auto-save there. On frame 63, we actually want the hand to take over as the reference object. So that automatically looks like it keyed. That's good, even though we don't have auto key on. Let's turn auto key back on. And excellent. So with the hand as the object in control, we now have a situation where our sword now follows our hand. Beautiful. But what's really powerful about this constraint versus the parent-child constraint is the fact that later on in the animation, when we want to change, say, the sword's original offset position, we can do it with this constraint, and we'll still have the katana actually be on the table where we picked it up at. So, let's see. So if we go ahead and move to about, let's actually go ahead and use a divide and conquer technique. And we'll go ahead and move halfway through the animation to about here. And we'll go ahead and mimic my pose to her pose. We'll also take some artistic liberties here as well and change kind of sort of the rotation of her body and different things like that, just to add a little bit more emphasis. I don't quite entirely like how I did my sweep. So I'm going to change just a few things about it. But for the most part, we're going to pretty much follow the reference. So yeah, halfway through the swing, so about here, which would be frame 79, we're going to go ahead and mimic my pose there. So let's go ahead and grab the hand and grab the global axis. And we're going to go ahead and do this. Go ahead and grab the local, and we're going to go ahead and move our hand down ever so slightly. And at about this point is also where I'm going to want to manipulate the katana. So I want the katana to be firmly in her hands. And I wanted to have a similar feel to it, like the closet hanger piece has in my animation. So let's go ahead and hit the local axis, switch back to global. Let's go ahead and move that around and get it to a good spot there. Check the back as well, and I'm actually liking where it is. We're going to go ahead and actually clench the hand a little bit to fix things up on the back end of things. But I feel like my arm was a little bit closer to my body when I recorded. Since we don't have multiple camera angles, I didn't set up 2 cameras to record myself. It's going to be kind of difficult to really tell from the angle that I was at whether or not I had my arm closer to me or not. But here what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and pin the hand's rotation and translation down. This way we can actually move the elbow, and the hand will stay in place. As you can see, the hand is not being affected at all by the movement of the elbow. So we're able to keep that hand looking nice and flat. We're going to rotate the hand back up again a little bit, make the wrist look a little bit more even, a little bit more realistic, and then we'll turn off pinning for the hand again so that if we decide to move the arm, the hand will move with the arm. Alright, good. So, if we go back in time now, you can see that the katana still has its original offset. And that's because the multi-referential constraint from frame 62 and back, basically the katana is controlling the animation for that constraint. And then from this point forward, the hand is in control, and we're able to use the katana really nicely. So this is great. I need to do a little bit more work here as far as frame 84. It actually looks like my hand is up a little bit more. I'll actually bring that back. My hand is up a little bit more. And my wrist also looks like it's turned inward on the local x-axis. Looks like it's turned a little bit this way, which is actually causing the sword to be sideways in my hand there. My chest is leaned forward a little bit. am going to rotate the hips a little bit this way. Move her foot just a little bit out. Move this foot just a little bit in. Let's switch to global. And let's also bend her. So thanks to the snapping of the feet, we can actually bend the hips a little bit and change the weight of the character while still keeping the feet pinned to the ground, which is amazing. So this is looking pretty good as that pose there for that particular part. So good. We can work on all the in-betweens as well, if we so choose. It looks like I actually arced my hand here. But let's go ahead and get the final pose done. And stretch out the animation just a little bit more so I can see where I'm at as far as the final frame. So I think this is going to be the final frame of the sword swing. So this really seems unnatural to me. And yet when I followed through, then again, of course, considering the constraints of the room and all, I may or may not have completely went all out into my swing. We're going to add a lot more characteristic flair to hers. All right. But as far as the reference is concerned, I'm more concerned with the actual arc of the arm and making sure everything looks realistic as far as that is concerned. So the body we'll just have some artistic license with. So let's go ahead and move her hand way out in this general direction. Furthermore, let's go ahead and rotate the hips. And we'll also move the hips and move her forward more this way. Let's see, let's rotate at the knee. Yeah, my rotations don't seem to be working as well as I would like them to do. So let's go ahead and use global. And there we go, we're getting a lot more movement out of the knee now. Now there's a really good lynda.com tutorial. Fundamentals of Character Animation, I believe it's called. And it's an application agnostic tutorial. It basically just goes over just fundamentals of character posing in general, balance and weight, and adding character to your characters. And a lot of it is really, really useful as far as, you know, getting your curvatures and different things right. It's probably a whole bunch of other material, but I would definitely take a look at that tutorial as well as some other tutorials on, you know, just general balance of characters and different things like that. I'm still quite new to this stuff myself, so, but you know, try to keep your character in balance, you know, try to get a real balance. Once again, references is really, really, really helpful. Just looking at my general arc here, all my hip weight and most of my body weight seems to be over my feet. So that's giving me a really, really balanced position there. I'm trying to do the same thing with her here as well with this custom pose, trying to keep everything really balanced. That leg is the one that's giving the weight to the character. Her weight is completely, well, actually her weight is actually on this leg here, considering that this leg is bent. But just trying to make sure that this leg is almost straight as an arrow. Looks like it would be that way. I also feel like it would be planted more at an angle, which is the reason why I'm kind of sort of moving it in that general direction, just to make sure it's planted in a way that seems like the character would be perfectly balanced that way. All right, go back to our globals. And go back to local. And let's go ahead and arc that sword up. Looks like my hand motion is kind of sort of going. My hand's a lot more visible. In this shot. I think a lot of this is going to have to do with the rotations of the shoulder as well. Check my own shoulder, see where I'm at. Yeah, so I just kind of sort of just did a gesture myself, just to see how my shoulder would arc out. And I'm finding that, yeah, I definitely can't get my shoulder to go back that far. So it's a very unrealistic pose. So what we're going to do is move her arm back again. Back into the limits of human constraint here. So, yeah, it'd probably be about that far out. In turn, her arm definitely can rotate, so and then you can definitely pick up the elbow, the shoulder just a little bit this way. So that's actually more within the limits, which would explain also why I'm so forward, because of shoulder limitations, we can't really go that far back with the shoulder. So in turn, that means the hips have to move this way in order for her to arc out completely the way I'm expecting her to arc out. Alright, and then the wrist can go ahead and arc out a little bit further too. I think that's about the limit that the wrist can do. Alright, yeah, and I'm not liking her balance from this angle, so let's go ahead and change the balance of her character here. And we'll change the foot balance here. And we'll go ahead and make her stand a little bit more straight. Go here, try to bend. Trying to put most of that bend into the back leg, while at the same time allowing the front leg to bend forward. I think I'm going to need to rotate the hips some more this way in order to get that angle of motion that I'm looking for. There we go. get this hand here and push it back and kind of sort of give it a little bit of a bend. Alright. And then finally concentrate on her head. And using artistic license, let's have her look this way. All right. And I'm really liking that pose. So good, we're gonna go ahead and save. And we're gonna see how this looks without any of the in-betweens. So if we go back, she picks up the sword, she readies, and then she sweeps out. And it's already looking like her sweep is a little bit low. Looks like Motionbuilder did an okay job of getting us to the point that we needed to be at. It's just, we need to arc out. Looks like we're actually arcing out from a downward position. So this seems like a critical keyframe right here. So let's go ahead and use this one to add some more depth to this animation here. So go ahead and hit the alright. And yeah, I'm getting a little bit of jumpiness. I'm not sure what this is due to. I feel like it might have something to do with the constraints on occasion. But let's just get the hand to where we want the hand to be. Start with a little bit closer to the chest area. It's looking like she's getting ready to stab herself at the current moment, but we're going to fix that. Let's lock the rotations and the translations of the hand so that we can move the elbow separately. And then that way we can get the elbow up. And we're not going to be able to get the elbow out without moving the hand. So go back to the hand now. And we can go ahead and move the elbow out at an angle there. And then we can work on the actual hand itself to get the wrist in the correct position. So switching back to local mode here, go ahead and arc that wrist this way and checking from this angle. It's looking pretty good. Just want to make sure she doesn't cut herself. So we're going to take some artistic license once again on the actual location of where this downward sweep is. Probably should use one of my replica katanas. So I could have gotten a more accurate animation. Just want to play around with the elbow a little bit to get a much nicer arc. I just lifted my elbow up to kind of sort of get an idea of the limits of my own arm. You know, this looks about right. So, man, that's a really mean pose. That'd be something nice to take into Photoshop. Take a still frame of that, you know, do some some nice texturing or whatever. That'd be kind of cool. Sometimes I look at things like this, you know, different poses that I'm doing sometimes, look at her from all angles, and, you know, as promotional sometimes for animation, you know, you might take a pose from the animation and do some stuff with it. But let's see what we got here. So she picks it up, and she goes, and she follows through. All right, cool. She doesn't quite follow through with a extreme slice. And a lot of this may have to do with the fact that Motion Builder behind the scenes uses FK animation. Even though you're animating IK, and that just makes it easier for you as the animator to get things done. Moving different controls with the translation. Internally, Motion Builder knows for the most part that FK is generally how humans move. So generally we move in rotational arcs for the most part. Occasionally we don't. In this particular occasion, I'm thinking that maybe an arc-like movement, the way that Motion Builder thinks it's supposed to be, is not exactly the way that I want to go. It's a possibility. That being the case, we can tell Motion Builder that, hey, we actually want to control our character through IK. And we can do that by using the IK blend and reach here, right underneath your dummy. So, right here, I'm going to go ahead and key these at 0. And then at the final keyframe here, I'm going to go ahead and key these up to 100%. And I'm just going to see how the animation looks from an IK perspective. And yeah, I'm liking it. I am really liking it from an IK perspective. It's looking like the arc is following the way that I really want it to. Let's just see how the sword blade swing is going. So. Now, let's also see what happens if we actually set the IK to 100% immediately, instead of having it blend over time. Okay, then we can turn off the keys for these here, so that it's no longer keyed on this final frame. And I'm thinking that I'm really liking that. Let's see it from the angle that is taken from the video. And let's just watch this animation as an entirety in real time here. Not too shabby. Add some motion blur in After Effects, and that might look pretty damn polished. Now if we really want to, we can always come in here and take care of some more of the in-betweens to make it even more polished. You know, so looks like my arm, and I'm trying to grab the elbow, but it's not letting me work the elbow, so I just grabbed the hand effector instead. But it looks like on this frame here, my arm was more here, and looks like my hand was more downward. Let's lock the elbow this time, because I like where the elbow is, but I want to move the hand independently. So let's go ahead and unpin the hand, pin the elbow down, switch back to the hand, and then let's just go ahead and move the hand just down ever so slightly. So yeah, once again, that pinning is really useful. Let's move the hand out so we can move it away from her body. We still got the same silhouette here for the animation, so still good. Rotate the hand just ever so slightly up so that the wrist is even here. Just had a slight downward arc to it that I didn't like. And pretty good with that pose. I like this pose. All right. Let's see. Let's create some anticipation here in the hips. You know, by just moving them forward just a little bit more. Let's do a Control Z real quick. I want to unpin the elbow so that the elbow actually moves with the movement of the hips. Here we go. And just put just a little bit of weight there. Excellent. And then here, we have an extremely quick follow through actually. Even though this is the last frame of the animation, the fact of the matter is I'm pretty much in that last frame of the sweep for extensive duration of time. So we can go ahead and hit Control C with this keyframe selected, and then if we hit Control V, we will paste that keyframe here. So Control C and Control V, and that keyframe should be pasted right there. In turn, we're also going to need to paste that keyframe for all the other controls too. Easiest way I think to do this would actually be to go ahead and select all of our controls, then select this keyframe, do a Control C. I like to do a Control C and do a Control V, and that should paste the pose across the board for every single control. So it's a much faster movement. And then here at the end we have just a slower transition from me to. So I can go ahead and actually move this control up so slightly. What else happened? I moved a little bit forward also, so I can go ahead and move my hips just a little bit backward and up some more. And also rotate them ever so slightly. And then bring the arm down ever so slightly. go. So it's just a slight little bit of movement towards the end there. Okay, not quite liking what that hand is doing. Should be settling almost in an arc down to that final frame. So I think here what I might do is I might actually turn off that IK and see if that helps me. Okay, yeah, I think just a little less movement. All right, let's play that through and see how that looks from the beginning. And yep, I think we're looking pretty good. Alrighty, guys. So yeah, it looks like we're about where we're at. We're gonna do a lot more cleanup in the next chapter, and then we're also gonna go ahead and add that flip as well. But pretty much it. So in summary, went through and we added some, basically had her grip the sword with her hand. And then we used the referential constraint on frame 62 here to go ahead and attach the sword to the hand. And with the multi-referential constraint, what we were able to do is around frame 80 or so, we were able to actually move the katana and still be able to maintain the offset that we had at frame 62. So the katana still looks like it's on the table just fine. And then we were able to rotate it in her arm so that it looks more realistic there. Awesome. And then we just basically use the divide and conquer method to basically set up key poses. Divided the animation basically in half. Set up our key poses and then basically just use in-betweens to go ahead and clean up the motion of the animation to get our slice to go exactly where we wanted it to go. We still have a lot of work to do. You know, that slice isn't a perfect arc. But for the most part, everything is coming together. I would almost say that probably just start over from scratch here. Select all of our components and just go ahead and delete that keyframe out of there. And select this keyframe, do Control C, come back over here to where the animation is supposed to end, do a Control V, and we'll have a better look there, I think. And then all we have to do is just probably add some more emphasis to the end keyframe. In fact, maybe what I'll do is I'll actually just delete the end keyframe and go ahead and keyframe this back so that, yeah, we'll definitely take care of more of that in chapter 5 of this. So, all right. Thanks for watching, guys, and see you in the next one.